You didn't believe she was dead?
For a long time, I just refused to accept that she was gone. Part of, she would never do this to us, but also part of, maybe this is all part of a plan.
There are moments in history that stop the world. Moments so unexpected, so emotionally charged, that they pierce through the noise of everyday life and remind us that some stories never truly end. The announcement surrounding Princess Diana's tomb is one of those moments. After nearly 3 decades of silence, of quiet grief, of black swans gliding across a still lake on a private English estate, something has shifted. Something significant. And the world, still mourning a woman it never stopped loving, is paying very close attention. To understand why this announcement matters so deeply, you have to go back to the beginning. Not just to that devastating August night in Paris in 1997, but to the decisions that followed. The decisions about where Diana would rest, how she would be remembered, and what her legacy would mean to a monarchy that had, in many ways, failed her while she was alive. Because the story of Diana's tomb is not simply a story about burial and memorial. It is a story about power, love, grief, family, and the complicated relationship between one extraordinary woman and the institution that both defined and confined her. When Princess Diana died on August 31, 1997, the question of where to bury her was not a simple one. For centuries, British royals had been laid to rest in grand, sacred, historically significant locations. Westminster Abbey, Windsor Castle, St. George's Chapel. These were places of ceremony and pageantry, designed to remind the world of the monarchy's permanence and power. And for a woman who had been the most photographed person on the planet, the most recognized face in the world, the natural assumption was that she would join that tradition. She did not. Instead, Princess Diana was buried on a small island in the middle of an ornamental lake on the grounds of Althorp Park in Northamptonshire, the ancestral home of the Spencer family. The decision was made by her brother, Earl Charles Spencer, and it was deliberate, deeply personal, and quietly revolutionary. The ground was consecrated by the Bishop of Peterborough before her burial, giving the site the sanctity of hallowed ground without the grandeur of a royal chapel. It was private. It was protected. It was, in every sense, a place apart from the world that had consumed her. What makes this decision even more extraordinary is that it broke with Spencer family tradition as much as it broke with royal tradition. For over 5 centuries, 20 generations of the Spencer family had been interred in the Spencer Chapel in the nearby village of Great Brington. That vault held the remains of Diana's ancestors stretching back to the Tudor era. The original plan had been to lay her to rest there, among her own blood. But Earl Spencer changed course, and he has spoken openly about why. In an interview with the BBC in 2017, 20 years after his sister's death, Charles Spencer explained that security was the primary motivation. The island, reachable only by boat, created a natural barrier against intrusion. It gave her a privacy in death that the world had never allowed her in life. He also spoke of wanting her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, to be able to visit their mother without the pressures of public observation, without cameras or crowds, without the weight of ceremony. A quiet boat ride across a still lake. Just 2 sons and the memory of their mother. Notably, the royal family did not contest this decision. There was no insistence from Buckingham Palace that Diana be buried on royal property or in a royal chapel. And that silence, that quiet acceptance of Charles Spencer's choice, speaks volumes to many historians and royal observers. It suggests that even in death, Diana existed in a space that was somehow separate from the House of Windsor. The palace had stripped her of her HRH title following her divorce from Prince Charles in 1996. In a final unspoken act, they also relinquished any claim over where she would spend eternity. Once you understand the reasoning behind Diana's burial site, the physical reality of that site becomes even more moving. There's nothing quite like it anywhere in the world. It is not a monument designed by committees or approved by palaces. It is something far more personal, far more human, and in many ways, far more fitting for the woman it honors. The grave itself sits on a small island in the oval lake, an ornamental body of water created in 1868 during the Victorian era. The island is accessible only by rowing boat, and that simple fact carries an enormous symbolic weight. To visit Diana, you must cross water. You must make a deliberate journey. You cannot stumble upon her accidentally or pass by her on a busy street. You have to choose to go to her, and then you have to make the crossing alone or with those you trust most. Leading to the water's edge is a path lined with 36 oak trees, one for each year of Diana's life. Think about what that means as a visitor. As you walk that path, each tree represents a year she lived, a year she laughed and struggled and loved and gave of herself to the world. The trees are growing. They are alive. They are not marble or granite or gilded stone. They breathe and change with the seasons, just as Diana herself was always evolving, always becoming something greater than the role the world had assigned her. It is perhaps the most quietly profound tribute to a human life that exists anywhere in England. On the southern edge of the Oval Lake sits a summer house that was originally part of the Admiral's Arch Tea Gardens in London. This structure was relocated to Althorp and adapted to serve as a memorial space for visitors. For black swans make their home on the lake, moving through the water lilies with a grace that feels almost intentional. White roses and water lilies, both among Diana's favorite flowers, bloom in season around the banks, as if the landscape itself is still trying to honor her. There is also the Temple, a Grecian-style building on the Althorp grounds that bears Diana's name and has carried inscriptions dedicated to her memory since 1998. One of those inscriptions is a quote from Diana herself, words she spoke with a conviction that feels more relevant now than ever. Nothing brings me more happiness than trying to help the most vulnerable people in society. It is a goal and an essential part of my life, a kind of destiny. Whoever is in distress can call on me, and I will come running wherever they are. Read those words today in a world still grappling with inequality and suffering, and they land differently. They are not the words of a princess performing charity. They are the words of a woman who understood that her purpose was larger than any palace, any title, any institution. And they stand carved in stone at Althorp, a permanent promise that her family has chosen to maintain and honor. One of the most intimate and rarely discussed dimensions of Diana's burial is what was placed inside her coffin. These were not choices made by protocol officers or palace officials. They were choices made by the people who loved her, and they reveal something essential about who Diana truly was beyond the cameras and the ceremonies. Diana was dressed in a black, long-sleeved cocktail dress designed by Catherine Walker, a designer she had loved and trusted for years. The dress was one Diana herself had chosen just weeks before her death, a detail that carries a strange, melancholy significance. She was buried in shoes and stockings chosen with care, dressed with the same attention to appearance and dignity that had characterized her public life. In her hands were rosary beads, a gift from Mother Teresa, one of the most spiritually significant women of the 20th century. The timing of this connection is almost impossible to process without emotion. Mother Teresa died just 5 days after Diana, as if the world could not bear to hold both of them at once. That those beads crossed the Atlantic to rest in Diana's hands, given by a woman who had devoted her entire life to the suffering poor, speaks to the spiritual bond that the two women shared. They had met, admired each other, and recognized in each other a common dedication to human dignity. Also placed with Diana was a photograph of her 2 sons, William and Harry. It had been found in her handbag, carried with her, as she carried them always. The woman who was Princess of Wales, global humanitarian, fashion icon, and one of the most famous human beings alive was, at the end of every day, a mother. And it was as a mother that she was laid to rest, with the faces of her boys close to her hands. Diana was interred in a lead-lined coffin, a practice associated with royal and state burials in Britain. The use of such a coffin for a woman who had been stripped of her HRH title following her divorce illustrates the profound contradiction at the heart of her story. Officially, she was no longer royal at the time of her death. Unofficially, she was the most beloved member of the entire British royal family, arguably the most recognized woman in the world. The palace could remove a title. It could not remove what she meant to people. At her funeral, The royal standard that had draped her coffin was removed before burial. Even in that final moment, there was a negotiation, a quiet institutional assertion that she was not entirely one of theirs. And yet the world watching that funeral, the 2 billion people who lined streets or sat before television screens in tears, had already made their own determination. Diana belonged to all of them. For all the beauty and intentionality of Diana's resting place, it has not been a place of undisturbed peace. The threats to Althorp and to the memorial have been real, alarming, and deeply upsetting for the Spencer family and for Diana's millions of admirers around the world. Earl Charles Spencer has confirmed that there have been 4 attempted break-ins at the family home in recent years. These are not minor incidents. Althorp Park is a private estate with significant security measures, and the fact that determined individuals have repeatedly attempted to breach its boundaries speaks to a troubling fixation that Diana's grave inspires in some people. The island location, reachable only by boat, was chosen precisely because it would deter intrusion. And yet the attempts continue. More shocking still was an incident earlier in 2025, when a farmhouse on the Althorp property was destroyed in what was described as a suspected arson attack. Charles Spencer shared his reaction on social media, expressing his disbelief and distress that one of his estate's farm buildings had apparently been deliberately set on fire by vandals. The farmhouse was unoccupied at the time, which was the only mercy in an otherwise alarming situation. This pattern of intrusion and vandalism raises questions that go beyond security logistics. They speak to something darker about the nature of extreme devotion, about the way in which Diana's memory has been claimed by a public that sometimes loses the boundary between love and obsession. The Spencer family has spent nearly 3 decades guarding Diana's peace. They have done so out of love and out of a promise, implicit in Charles Spencer's famous eulogy at Westminster Abbey, to protect her and her memory from the forces that had made her life so difficult. His eulogy in 1997, delivered with barely controlled fury, remains one of the most extraordinary speeches ever given at a royal funeral. He spoke directly to his sister. He spoke about the blood family reclaiming her. He spoke about the unique qualities that he feared would be smoothed over by institutional forces. That speech was a declaration of intent, and the decades since have shown that the Spencer family has taken that intention seriously. But protecting a global icon from a grieving, sometimes obsessive world is an enormous and exhausting task. The arson attack and the break-in attempts have intensified debates about whether Althorp requires additional resources, whether the memorial should be given some form of national heritage protection, and whether the British government or the Crown has any responsibility to help safeguard the resting place of a woman who was arguably the most significant public figure Britain produced in the second half of the 20th century. Of all the dimensions of Diana's tomb story, none is more emotionally profound than the relationship her sons have with the place where she rests. It is a relationship defined by love, by loss, and by the particular anguish of being motherless at a young age in the most public circumstances imaginable. In July 2017, on what would have been Diana's 56th birthday, Prince William and Prince Harry traveled to Althorp together for a private memorial service marking the 20th anniversary of her death. The service was led by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, and was attended by the Duchess of Cambridge and a young Prince George and Princess Charlotte. It was a family gathering at a graveside, which is both the most ordinary and most heartbreaking thing a family can do. And yet there was nothing ordinary about it. They were a royal family, divided in ways the world was already beginning to understand, standing by a lake looking at an island where the woman who had bound them together lay at rest. William had taken Catherine to Althorp in 2011, introducing his future wife to his mother in the only way that was still possible. Harry brought Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, in 2022, rowing across the oval lake to make that same introduction. In his memoir, Spare, Harry described the experience of crossing the lake with Meghan with a simplicity that makes the moment unbearably moving. He described helping her into the boat, steadying it, taking up the oars, and rowing across to the island. No cameras, no courtiers, no protocol. Just a man and his wife crossing water to visit his mother. That image, a prince reduced to simply being a son, contains more emotional truth than any official statement about Diana's legacy ever could. Whatever the divisions and controversies that have surrounded Harry's decisions in the years since, that moment on the lake is something recognizable to any person who has ever lost a parent and found themselves standing at a grave wishing there were more to say and more to hear. Harry also revealed in his memoir that he had, at one point, wished to be buried alongside his mother at Althorp. That wish was not granted. He has since made arrangements to be interred at Frogmore House. But the wish itself, quietly mentioned in a book full of extraordinary revelations, may be the single sentence that best captures the depth and permanence of his grief. The boy who lost his mother at the age of 12 has never, in all the decades since, fully recovered from that loss. He has built a new life in a new country with a family of his own. But some part of him has always been on that lake, rowing toward the island, wishing he could stay. In the summer of 2025, Earl Charles Spencer shared photographs on his social media accounts showing the Diana Memorial Temple at Althorp freshly repainted. The images were simple and beautiful. The Grecian-style building gleamed in the English summer light, its inscriptions clear and legible, its presence in the landscape serene and dignified. Spencer's accompanying message was brief, noting that the temple had been beautifully repainted and expressing his pleasure at seeing it looking so fine as Althorp prepared to welcome summer visitors. But the announcement that truly electrified Diana's global following came when Spencer confirmed that Althorp House and its grounds would be open to members of the public from July through August 2025. For Diana's admirers, many of whom have spent years or even decades wanting to pay their respects, this represented something extraordinary. An invitation to come, to see, to stand in the landscape that holds her. The response on social media was immediate and overwhelming. Fans from across Britain and around the world began making plans. For many, a visit to Althorp is an act of pilgrimage. It is not tourism in any conventional sense. It is an expression of a grief that has never fully resolved, a love for a woman most of them never met, but who felt, somehow, as though she understood them. Diana had that quality in extraordinary measure. She made people feel seen. She made them feel that suffering was not shameful and that love was not weakness. And in a world that can feel cold and transactional, the idea of standing near where she rests carries a weight that is difficult to articulate but impossible to dismiss. It is important to be clear about what visitors can and cannot access. Diana's grave itself, on the island in the Oval Lake, is not open to the public. It remains accessible only by boat, and the Spencer family has maintained that boundary carefully and rightly. What visitors can experience is the surrounding landscape, the 36 oak trees lining the path to the water, the lake itself with its black swans and water lilies, the temple with its inscriptions, and the broader grounds of one of England's most historic family estates. They can leave flowers on the bench outside the temple, as so many have done over the years. They can stand at the water's edge and okay across to the island where she rests. And for most people who make that journey, that is enough. More than enough. It is a chance to be close, in whatever way is possible, to a woman who meant the world to them. The renewed attention to Diana's resting place in 2025 has reignited a debate that has been simmering for nearly 3 decades. What does the British royal family, and by extension the British state, owe to the memory of Princess Diana? She was stripped of her HRH title in 1996 following her divorce from Prince Charles. She was never fully embraced by the institution, even during the years of her greatest service to it. Yet she transformed the monarchy's relationship with the public in ways that its surviving members still benefit from. She modernized it. She humanized it. She showed that a royal could be vulnerable, fallible, emotionally present, and more effective for it. The charitable work she did, particularly in the areas of landmine awareness, AIDS advocacy, and mental health support, was groundbreaking in ways that her sons have explicitly carried forward in their own public service. The question of whether the Crown should play a more formal role in honoring and maintaining her memorial is not merely sentimental. It is a question about institutional accountability and historical reckoning. Diana's resting place is currently maintained entirely by the Spencer family, using private resources on private land. There is no national memorial in the same sense that there are memorials to monarchs or prime ministers. There is no official crown funding allocated to Althorp. The responsibility has rested entirely with Charles Spencer and his family, who have borne it with evident love and considerable personal cost. Given the arson attacks, the break-in attempts, and the ongoing global demand from Diana's admirers to have access to her memory, there is a reasonable argument that this private arrangement has reached its limits. The site where Princess Diana rests is, by any measure, a place of national and international historical significance. Treating it as purely a private family matter may no longer be adequate or fair to the Spencer family, who have been standing guard for nearly 30 years. What is perhaps most striking about the ongoing story of Diana's tomb is what it reveals about the nature of her legacy. Most public figures, however beloved, see their cultural presence diminish over time. The grief softens. The tributes become more formal and less felt. The flowers stop coming. But Diana has defied that pattern in ways that continue to surprise even those who have studied her life and death most carefully. Nearly 3 decades after her death, more people want to visit Althorp each year, not fewer. The flowers left at the temple bench continue to accumulate. Young people who were not born when she died are discovering her story and feeling the same recognition, the same connection that their parents and grandparents felt. Her quote carved into the temple stone about running toward anyone in distress resonates in ways that feel contemporary and urgent rather than historical and remote. Her sons carry her forward in their public work, even as their own relationship has become strained and complicated. William, as Prince of Wales, continues to champion mental health awareness and conservation efforts that echo his mother's values. Harry has spoken about her openly and often, keeping her presence alive in the public consciousness in ways that are sometimes painful but always authentic. The Diana effect, that particular combination of compassion, directness, and genuine human connection, can be felt in both of them, even as they have taken very different paths. The announcement about Althorp in 2025 is not, at its heart, about a tomb. It is not about renovation or repainting or visitor schedules. It is about the persistence of love. It is about the fact that the world lost someone irreplaceable in 1997 and has never entirely made peace with that loss. The oval lake is quiet. The black swans move through the still water. The 36 oak trees stand in their row, living and breathing and growing. And somewhere on that island, beyond the reach of cameras and crowds, Diana rests. But the world is still watching, still talking, still rowing across the water in grief and in love to be close to her, in whatever way is still possible. If Princess Diana taught us anything in her 46 years, it was that real love endures beyond titles, beyond institutions, beyond even death itself. The announcement from Althorp is the latest proof of that truth, and it will not be the last.